Hey, it's James from 4x4 Earth, and welcome to track 18 of the 4x4 Earth podcast, Tim Bates and the Wonnangatta murders.
Join James from 4x4earth.com as he learns all there is to know about four-wheel driving, camping, fishing, and getting out and exploring our great country on the 4x4 Earth podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. We've been really lucky to have some super interesting guests on the podcast recently. So we've had Robert Pepper and his common four-wheel drive myths, and that has been one of our most popular podcasts ever. Thousands and thousands of people have been downloading that one, and it's been really interesting because we've covered some really interesting technical topics, which is one of the things that Robert is so great at discussing. Been really interesting. And then, of course, we had our epic interview with one of the nicest guys in the four-wheel drive industry, Ruthie, talking about some of his experiences four-wheel driving and, more importantly, the great work that he's trying to do from a political point of view to try and keep to protect our freedom to be able to go and drive the tracks that we know and love. Now, one of the easiest ways to listen to the podcast is to download the 4x4 Earth app. It's available in both iTunes and in the Google Play Store. So if you've got an Android or an Apple phone, go in, download the app. What you can do there is you can download each of the episodes, which means that you'll then be able to listen to it when you go off-road. So the easiest way, and the apps have been really, really successful, and they've both had thousands and thousands of downloads each. So you'll also get notifications of when a new podcast comes out. Today, we're really lucky to have Tim Bates on the podcast. Now, Tim has done a lot of four-wheel driving in the high country. Very, very knowledgeable about the history of the high country. So much so that he's done... he's had his own TV show called Postcards from the Bush. And I'm going to include a link. If you haven't seen Postcards from the Bush, it's a great watch. I'll include a link to it on YouTube so that you can go and have a look at it. But we're going to be covering one of the topics that he's really interested in, which is the Wonnangatta murders. So let's get into it. Hey, Tim, welcome to the podcast.
G'day, James. Yeah, thanks very much, mate, for having me along.
No problems. So, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Look, I've been into the high country now for probably over 40 years. My background started way back when I was a kid, where I went right through the scouting movement from the ages of about sort of 8 through to 16, 17, and that's where my passion for the high country really came from, where I learnt to, understand it, read it, and certainly gain the respect for the place.
Alrighty, so what sort of four-wheel drive do you drive?
These days I've got a 2009 model GU Patrol with all the bells and whistles on it. It's well set up for the style of touring that I do.
And why did you choose that?
Look, prior to that, I had a couple of D22 Navaras. Now, they were a great vehicle, but at the end of the day, my kids just grew out of the D22, so I moved into the Patrol for a bit more extra room, and plus the coils all around, the suspension setup and the running gear on the Patrol is, pretty much bulletproof. So that's why I went down that road.
Nice. And what mods have you done to it?
Oh, where do I start? Probably easier what I haven't done, but look, the main one's underneath. It's front and rear locked. I've got 42% reduction gears in the transfer case. Under the bonnet, I've put the aftermarket intercoolers, exhaust, chip, and just general stuff inside from drawers and that sort of stuff in UHF. But they're the main mods I've done underneath it, and 3-inch suspension lift.
How do you find the chip? Make a big difference?
Look, the chip it certainly made a massive difference between the chip and the exhaust put on together, and then you combine that with the aftermarket cooler as well. It's certainly a good combination and works really well in my vehicle for sure. Yeah, I got great results from it.
Now, mud, snow, sand, or rock?
Look, I enjoy all facets of four-wheel driving. I do enjoy this time of year when it comes to snow season. We all get very excited for snow season. Look, there's nothing better than seeing... Look, the high country's great any time of year, but to see it this time of year when it's covered in snow, it's just something else, and it's an amazing place to see when it's covered in snow. So I do enjoy getting up and throwing the swag down on the ground and, and having a fire in the snow with a bunch of mates. It's a fantastic place.
Now, the best track that you've ever done and why?
Oh, best track, that's really hard because there's so many of them. Look, but for me, there's for the style of four-wheel driving, the touring four-wheel driving that I like to go and do, there's a couple of standouts, and that's certainly the Blue Rags and Billy Goats around that Dargo area. You can't go past those, but look, just recently in Easter time this year, I headed over past Omeo and up over Davies Plain, and was lucky enough to get up on Mount Pinnabar. We spent the night up there. Now that fair income, the view from there is just something else. I really think that almost tops off. As good as Blue Rag and Billy Goat are, but geez, you need to get up on top of Mount Pinnabar and have a look at that. It's just stunning.
It's not. I've never been out. I've been out to Omeo a few times, but never been up to Mount Pinnabar. How far out of Omeo is it?
To drive over Davies Plain took probably about 2 or 3 hours to have a run over Davies Plain. It's quite an easy drive over Davies Plain. It's a really nice drive in amongst the trees there. It's quite scenic. And then drop into Davies Plain Hut there at the top there. It's a great place to spend the night. Then after that, drop down into Tom Grogan. That's a beautiful place to camp there on the Murray River.
Yep. And,
you can base camp there and do Mount Pinnabar off that.
Yeah, nice. Now, what's the hairiest moment that you've had four-wheel driving, and what did you learn from it?
Geez, that's only just recently too. Wasn't that long ago, only about two or 3 months ago, I was put into a very awkward situation where there's a track out of Jamison, and I was having issues with the lockers these days, and I was halfway up this. It was a dry day, which is probably quite fortunate, but I was halfway up this quite nasty hill, this rutty hill, and the lockers weren't working, and I got halfway up, and the car wouldn't go any further, and the wheels were just spinning, and it was really quite steep, and I was on this awkward angle, and I'm sitting in there, and I just kept my foot on the accelerator and that just to keep the wheels spinning. And going through my head at this time is I'm thinking, what is going to happen when these wheels stop? Is it going to stay there? Is it going to slide back? Is it going to go roll over, end over? I did not know what was going to happen. So rather than touch the clutch, you never touch the clutch. So I just jumped on the brake and stalled the car. And fortunately enough, it stayed there, and that was a breath of fresh air. I tell you, it did stay, because I had no idea what was going to happen. It's quite a moment.
It's scary when you have those kind of moments, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And lucky I was away with a good bunch of fellas that knew what they were doing, so they raced up to assist, and we secured the vehicle pretty quickly with a winch around the tree, and then so we ended up getting out of that one okay, but. Until those wheels stopped spinning, I didn't know what was going to happen, so it was a bit of a moment.
What sort of winch have you got?
I've got the 12,000 it's winch in there at the moment, which sort of does the job. Works pretty well.
Cool. So one of the things that you're probably most renowned for would be the Wonnangatta area.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of special places when it comes to Victorian high country, but Wonnangatta's one of those places that I think it needs to be on everybody's bucket list. If you haven't been in there, you certainly need to get in. It's as far as remoteness goes in the high country, it's about as remote as you can get. You're sort of 4 hours, sometimes 5 hours, depending which way you go out, but of getting out of the place. So if something goes wrong in there and you need to get out in a hurry, it's quite a difficult place. But then you look at the Wonnangatta murders that happened, back in 1918, and there's a stack of history attached to that place, and it's a fascinating place with the unsolved murders that happened back then. And but there's still a lot of history and a lot of things you can go and look at down there from those days that are still in the area. But you need to get out of your car and go and have a bit of a walk and find them. But just love that place. It's beautiful down there.
And you've done a bit of research into the Wonnangatta murders, haven't you?
Yeah, have done a bit of research, because it's a thing that interests me a lot. I'm quite interested in history, but it's quite interesting what happened down there with those two guys that were murdered. And there's a few theories sort of floating around as to what happened, and so it's one of those things. I think you've got to go down there. There's a couple of good books getting out and about. Read the books and sort of make up your own mind, but. It's really important, I think, that those theories stay unsolved.
So where did they actually happen? Where did the murders actually happen?
Well, Jim Barclay, he was the station owner at the time. He was apparently shot in the homestead, and from there taken down to the banks of the Conglomerate River, which is about 500-600 metres out the back of the homestead, and he was buried in the soft sand down there by the riverbank, and was eventually found by police when and his good mate Harry Smith found him down there. So once he was found, then the hunt was on for the farmhand that was helping down there at that stage, John Bamford, because they thought, well, maybe he was the main man for the murder. But then eventually he was found with a bullet in the back of his head up on Howard High Plains. So that took him out of the equation on possibly murdering Jim Barclay. So it's unsolved, and it's a very interesting, fascinating story what happened down there.
And so what are the theories that happened?
The couple of theories floating around that in one of the books that it was probably due to cattle duffing, cattle rustling. But then my sort of theory on it, with some of the information I've got, and particularly making the TV show we did down there, that Barclay was known as a bit of a ladies' man, and suggesting that something untoward's gone on there, and one of the cattlemen families around that area have taken things into their own hands and dealt with it their own way, and I sort of feel that poor old John Bamford, I think he was just wrong place, wrong time for him. I suspect that he was probably at the homestead when these guys have turned up to have a good old chat with Jim Barclay, and as they've arrived, he's left to head up to the Howard High Plains, because that's where they had their cattle lease up there. So he's gone up there to do some work with the cattle, and I think these guys, after they've dealt with John Barclay, that they've now had to go off and take care of Bamford as well. So they've gone up there and murdered him, and once those two are taken out of the equation, particularly Bamford's gone, there's no one to prove, no one else is to see these guys come in. So this is why it's remained unsolved, and it's an amazing murder mystery down there. It
is interesting. And so the families still have a direct connection to that area, do they?
Well, it's all under national park now, so there's no private ownership of the land anymore. I think National Parks took it over in mid-80s, I think it was, or mid-90s when National Parks took it over. So yeah, there's no private ownership down there anymore.
So who were the people that you spoke to when you were doing the research for the show?
Keith Layton was one of the guys. He's one of the authors of Wonnangatta Mystery. He's a local guy out of Mansfield. Keith had a really big part in helping us out putting the TV show Postcards the Bush together on the Wonnangatta murders. So he was a big input into that. Interesting.
Anyone else that you spoke to?
Look, we interviewed a lot of people. We interviewed a number of cattlemen families. We interviewed Charlie Lovick. These are three big cattlemen families out of Merrijig. There was Charlie Lovick and Graham Stoney and Bruce McCormick. Now, these guys wouldn't have certainly been around with the age they are now. They wouldn't have been around when these murders took place, but certainly either their parents or grandparents certainly would have been around. Now, there's no doubt the information would have been passed down through generations as to what happened down there, but these guys are holding it very close to their chest and are not releasing to what sort of they really know what happened down there, and it's great, and this is how it has to be. It needs to stay unsolved forever.
It's interesting how those sort of, even though, 1918, so 98 years ago.
Yeah, close on nearly, 98 years ago.
And they're still not talking about, do you think they know what happened?
I don't think there's any doubt in the world these guys know, but it was interesting when we interviewed them that the three of them finished off with the same one-liner of Bush justice was done, and I thought that was quite interesting that they had come out and said that one line. So that says to me that something pretty serious has gone down there, and some families have taken care of things themselves rather than having the law take care of it.
Are there any direct descendants of the guy who was murdered?
That I'm not 100% sure.
Weren't able to track any? Yeah, that would have been interesting.
Yeah, look, well, actually, having said that, he did have a sister that lives over Tarralgon Way or somewhere over there. Now, we had approached her, but she didn't want to sort of get involved. Maybe she didn't want to rehash some of the past. It might have been pretty hard for her, no doubt. So there's certainly still, and there's family members that are still around here today.
That's interesting, because one would have thought that they would have almost be, the wound shouldn't be that raw, really, for something that happened 98 years ago. So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, look, you know, and you just don't know what they know too, and you know, they probably want to, you know, now it's all gone and forgotten. They just want to move on, and that's all fine. Fully respect that.
Yeah. So, how do you normally get into Wonnangatta? What route do you normally take?
Look, depending where I am at the time, but there's really only three main ways of getting into Wonnangatta. You can either come in through Lacola and up over Howard High Plains and down Zika Spur in that way. That's quite a nice drive in. Or the other way is, you know, come in from Dargo and up over Cynthia Range and down through that way into Wonnangatta. Or there's an easier way in if you want to try and get a camper trailer in there, is coming through the Myrtleford side. That's quite an easy way to get in. You know, quite often you'll see camper trailers sometimes down in Wonnangatta, and that's generally where people come in from that way.
Yep. What tracks are out that way that you would normally go and do?
Well, look, it's not many. You can sort of, if you want to do a circuit, but mainly the time when we go in there, if we're not staying there, sometimes if we're staying at Talbotville, sometimes we'll do a run down there for lunch.
Yep.
It's about a 3 hour drive each way. So we go down there for lunch up over the Cynthia Range and either down Wombat Range or down, what's the other one? Down Hern Spur. The Hern Spur, they're all it's all steep country, but they're good tracks. So that's sort of the main ones we sort of do in that area.
Talbotville's a beautiful place.
Talbotville's, yeah, look, it's up on one of my favourite places to go, but I really only go there for a long weekend because, you know, it's 4 hours just to get to Dargo Pub from my place, so it's really too far kind of for a weekend. But any long weekend or extended stay than that, Talbotville's an ideal place to go and spend some time. Base camp there because, you know, you can go anywhere from there up to your Blue Rag and Billy Goat Bluff from there, and even into Wonnangatta, as I just mentioned.
Yep. Yeah, it's perfectly situated for some of the iconic high country tracks, isn't it? Oh,
look, absolutely, and there's a lot of close by, even tracks even just close to Talbotville itself. You know, the 24 river crossings you can do up the Crooked River, and do a loop up over Collingwood Spur and back into Talbotville. That's quite a nice little, 2-3 hour little drive if you want to do a bit of a loop.
Yep. What are the other attractions from a history point of view out that way? What are the things that you like to go and see, or like to take new people in to have a look at?
Especially around that Dargo Talbotville area, the old mining towns, like even Talbotville itself. There's still a lot of history remains there if you know where to go looking. If you look closely enough in the grasses down there, some of the old brick pathways are still there that led between all the shops and things. The fruit trees that are still down there, they're original trees from back in the days when Talbotville was a full-on gold mining town. You know, between Talbotville, Bulltown and Hogtown, those three gold mining towns, you're talking thousands of people were living down there back down in those days. Now, they would have been harsh days living down there in those environments. During winter, it's a freezing cold place, and those miners would have been in just horrific conditions back down in those days just to try and make a few quid they were looking for to get some gold out of the ground. But there's still a lot of history around down there if you just need to know where to go and have a look.
Oh, and that's one of the things I always find amazing is just, you look at some of the heavy machinery that's out there still, and you think, how did they get that here? It would be difficult to do it today. It would be horrendously expensive. And yet these people did it 100 years ago, even longer. You just think, how did they actually manage to do that? Because it would have been a huge engineering feat to get such heavy equipment into such a hilly, mountainous place with, pretty limited equipment back in those days.
Yeah, look, it's staggering, as you just mentioned, the machinery that still is out in the bush and even the condition that it's still in. Like, it just wants a bit of a fire put in and get the steam rolling, and you can just about get these things going again. But, the Good Hope mine out of Talbotville, that's an amazing mine to walk out and have a look at that. It's a fair walk to get up there, and you think, when you get up there, there's still the rock crushers are there, and the big boiler's still there, and you think, how do they get these machines, up to where they are? It's staggering to how they move such heavy equipment into those areas back in those days.
How far is that mine from Talbotville?
It's about 5, 6, 7 crossings out from Talbotville. It's signposted to Good Hope mine. And then you drive up there, you park your car in there, and then it's probably close to a K, maybe a K walk.
Yep.
bit under a K walk. But it's quite a steep track going up, but well worth going up and have a look at. At least the return trip's all downhill, but it is a fairly steep track to get up there, but good maintained track to get up. But if you're into history and like to have a look at some of the old machinery, that Good Hope mine down at Talbotville is well worth going to have a look at.
What else is there in there that you like going to see?
Well, you still got the old cemetery, which is just out the back of Talbotville. That's still got some original headstones in there.
Yep.
And even between the cemetery and Talbotville itself, in the bush in there, if you walk in through there, you can see some of the old water races that are still very evident. Where they've dug all these water races out by hand from the gold mining days. There's still a lot around, but you just got to get out of your car and go and explore a bit.
Exactly, and that's one of the good things. I'd forgotten about the cemetery out there. One of the things I always find amazing about bush cemeteries is the age of the people. We live in a society where the average age when people die these days is 80, 85, something like that. There's a lot of children in those cemeteries, a lot of people in their teens, a lot of people who definitely died well and truly before their time should have ended. And I think that just reminds you of just how harsh things were back then. A lot of infectious diseases and just a lot of accidents that would have, that we would view as being, moderately serious, life-threatening back in those days.
Yeah, look, Wonnangatta's, the cemetery down at Wonnangatta, if you have a look at the original headstones that are still down there and look at some of the ages, there's particularly in the Bryce days, which is before the Wonnangatta murders, we're talking back in the sort of mid-late 1800s. But they're some of their kids that have died down there, and as I say, in a four-wheel drive, you're looking sort of 4 or 5 hours to get out of there, but to do that on horseback, you're looking days to get out. So and if illness strikes you down there, we're in all sorts of trouble back in those days. But there's some really young kids that have died from that Bryce family down in there.
They definitely did it a lot tougher back then.
Oh, absolutely. They had to be extremely self-sufficient. Look, we're so lucky these days. We can just jump in the car and just shoot down the supermarket and get what we want. But down there, particularly in Wonnangatta, they've had to be so self-sufficient and grow everything. And they can't just zip down the shop and if they've forgot to get something, it's days and weeks later before they can go back and get these things. So they've got to be very, very self-sufficient and up with first aid supplies and medical supplies and all that sort of stuff.
How big did the town of Wonnangatta get?
Well, there wasn't actually a town in there. It was only a homestead. Only the homestead, which was the cattle station down there. It's all natural, cleared land. It's not hasn't been cleared or anything. It's a natural grasslands down in there. It's just a beautiful place. And it was only over the homestead down there. There wasn't actually a town in Wonnangatta.
So what would their local town have been from there?
Oh, coming back into Mansfield or into Dargo. Dargo's probably their closest town for supplies. They would have gone into Talbotville and did a lot of their supplies from there. There was an amazing amount of shops in Talbotville, from post office and pubs and drug stores and chemists and butcher shops and all sorts of things in Talbotville. It's amazing. It's a pity none of this is still isn't still evident. It was quite a large little township going on in Talbotville.
I think you raise a really good point, because the number of people last time we were there, the number of people who were just playing cricket or wandering around, playing in the creek and not realising that the footpaths are still evident there. You can still see some of the, the foundations of some of those buildings. You're actually camping in what was once a thriving town.
Absolutely. During the winter time when the grass is pretty lush and green down there, it's a bit harder to see the pathways. But during those summer months when the grass dies off a bit, the brick pathways are still very evident. You can see them quite clearly if you go and have a look.
It's interesting because Graham sent me a message on Facebook, and he's got a photo looking down on Talbotville from around, I think it's around 1920.
Yeah, right.
And and I wouldn't have been too many photos back then, but it's an amazing photo because you can see, the little bridge over the stream that they had then, and quite a bustling little place. And I one of the things that I find really interesting is the fact that now there's nothing really to tell you that there was a town there, apart from some brick foundations, apart from some paths, and apart from a sign that says this is the township of Talbotville. most people just think of it as a camping ground. And I think it's one of the things that's really important is that we remember that, because obviously for them, obviously people didn't go four-wheel driving back in the 1920s. So with Talbotville, what happened there? The gold ran out, did it?
Yeah, look, gold all dried up in the end, but the last people to move out of Talbotville was only in the 1950s. Now, that's not that long ago. And when you go down there now, as you say, there's nothing really evident to say there was ever a township down there. But there was thousands of people operating that river, between those three towns of Talbotville, Bulltown and Hogtown. It's just a shame that, there's nothing left. And it's the same with Wonnangatta. It's an absolute shame that the house has been burnt down, but that was just a tragedy what happened down there. But it would have been nice if even just rebuild the shell of the original house down there would be fantastic for people to go in. You could line the walls inside with all the history and those kinds of things, because it staggers me still how many people do not even know what happened in Wonnangatta. Like, I've passed people before, and people will come up and ask you, about Wonnangatta, and they've got no idea what happened down there, and it just staggers me.
Yep.
That people still don't know what happened in Wonnangatta, because it's just an amazing story. But as you say, there's not a great deal of information around to inform people.
When did the house burn down?
It was in the 80s too, I think, early mid-80s, I think. But apparently they suggested bushwalkers were staying in there and left the fire going, and logs rolled out and being all a timber house. Oh,
so it wasn't in a big bushfire, it was actually burnt?
Yeah, it actually burnt down, yeah.
Oh, that's a tragedy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real shame. But the piles of rocks that are still there, they're what's remaining evidence of the two fireplaces and that were in the actual homestead. But it's a shame that something can't be rebuilt down there in a way of even just a shell. Yep. A bit like what they've done with Craig's hut, just keep it as a shell and fill it full of information so people know what goes on.
Well, one of the sad things is you can't put too much infrastructure out there because idiots will, destroy it. But yeah, you'd think that, because it'd be the perfect place for have it somewhere where you've got a little bit of protection out from the harsh elements, because it would get pretty cold out there.
It gets extremely cold, even during the peaks of summer, because you're surrounded by mountains, and it's only sort of about 300 metres above sea level, 300, 400 metres above sea level down in Wonnangatta. Even during summer it can still get pretty cool down in there.
So it's interesting having a look at that photo from 1920 of Talbotville. I find it's one of the things that for me it's really important that we keep tracks open, because there's a lot of bush towns now that really rely on the four-wheel drive tourism, the economic benefits of people coming in, filling up, having a meal at the pub, buying supplies that they need, food, whether it's seeing the mechanic after they've done their diff or busted a tyre or something. It's really important that those economic benefits flow through to those local towns, because you look at somewhere like Walhalla, and I would be really interested to know what percentage of their economy thrives on the four-wheel drive tourism market. I would have thought it would have to be pretty high. And places like Mansfield, what's the economic impact in Mansfield because Mansfield's starting to get quite a reputation as a place that four-wheel drivers shouldn't really be thinking about going through because of issues with getting their vehicles defected.
Yeah, look, I don't really know what's going on there. It's something would be interesting to know why Mansfield is such a hot topic. It's common knowledge, that four-wheel drivers now are bypassing Mansfield, coming out different ways, and just through that high risk of having vehicles defected. It's got me buggered. It's the only country. It's the only town around the whole high country that's just on the radar as far as four-wheel drivers and being targeted for four-wheel drivers. And look, I know quite a few people with it. Either got businesses or live in towns, and business owners are certainly starting to feel the pinch and noticing that the amount of four-wheel drivers coming into town. And so look, something somehow needs to be inquired into this as to what's going on down there, I think.
So you think that the business owners in Mansfield are starting to suffer because four-wheel drivers are staying away?
Absolutely, yeah. They're actually feeling it, starting to feel it, and seeing that numbers are dropping off. Like especially on the big weekends, like your long weekends, Christmases, Easters, those sorts of things. Four-wheel drivers are bypassing Mansfield like you got no idea.
I know it's a hot topic on the forum, and you see it every long weekend. There'll be at least one of the groups will be mentioning, make sure you don't go through Mansfield because if there's any issues whatsoever with your vehicle, you'll end up defected. And that's got to be an expensive and unpleasant experience for anyone to have their car taken off the road, particularly when it'd be awful on the way in.
Well, I saw a trip that was posted on Facebook about February, March or something this year. Just a random guy was just putting a trip up saying, look, I'm going to go away for a couple of days. Who wants to tag along? It was open to anyone sort of thing. And when he put up his trip location where it was going to start from, people openly posted that they wouldn't go because it was going to start in Mansfield, purely because of those reasons of those defect issues. Now, sure, there's probably genuine reasons why some of these vehicles are being defected. There's no ifs, buts about that. But still, anyone driving a four-wheel drive, whether you've got issues with your vehicle or not, people are still just bypassing the downtown because of those reasons.
That's scary because, the sad thing is, for us, we've got the freedom to go somewhere else. So we can not go through Mansfield. We can do track somewhere else. We're spoilt for options in Victoria. My big concern is about those people who are running those businesses because they're the ones who are starting to feel a pinch. How many of them are going to lose their jobs? How many of them are going to have to shut their business down? And once you get one business shutting down, what's the flow-on effect from the other businesses? And then what happens when they close the school? What happens when they lose their banks? What happens with all of those sort of things? And then, how many people will be living there in 20 or 30 years?
Look, I certainly notice the differences myself. Like this time of year during the snow season, Mansfield is very, very busy with the snow traffic going through. But during those summer months, when there's no snow around, I've certainly noticed big differences with the amount of four-wheel drives you see parked in the main street. It's a very noticeable difference, there's no doubt about that.
Compare and contrast to some of the big... and so Walhalla, Walhalla's a massive four-wheel drive town. Some of the beach towns in South Australia, every second vehicle's got a sand flag, and a lot of them have got plates, Victorian plates or plates from other states because people come to drive those the great beaches that they've got there. It's a massive boost to their economy. Yeah,
look, and as you mentioned, Walhalla, it's a very tucked away little town down in there, and it's certainly a very attractive area. The whole Walhalla area is very attractive for four-wheel drives to get in there. So if you take away that four-wheel driving element out of those particular areas and start closing tracks down, well, little towns like Walhalla, they would struggle a great deal. They'd struggle big time.
Exactly. Walhalla is a beautiful town, but it's not the kind of place that you would go to regularly. Unless, of course, it's on the way out to fuel up and to get a feed and get any supplies that you need as you're coming back from a weekend of awesome four-wheel driving.
Yeah, look, spot on there, James. If it wasn't for the four-wheel drive in that area, it's not a town that I would certainly visit, on a regular basis. You might go a couple of times a year and drop into the pub there for lunch, or or grab a coffee, or do the train ride down there, which are good things to go and do. But they're not things, or not a town you'd be probably wanting to go into or visit on a regular basis, I don't think. So that four-wheel driving option is certainly very, very important. That we keep it coming through, but to keep it coming through, we need to keep these tracks open and everyone doing the right thing, and that'll certainly help these little towns.
Absolutely. All right, Tim, thank you very much for your time today, and it was great to have a chat. Great to hear about Wonnangatta. It's a really interesting place. I'll have to go out there and have a bit of a hunt around and see what we can see, because it sounds like a beautiful place as well. So thanks.
Good on you, James. Thanks very much, and thank you.
No worries. Just amazing, all of the history that, so many people sort of drive by. And, one of the things I picked up from what Tim said is you got to get out of your car and you got to go and have a look, The cemetery at Talbotville, how many people knew that was there. And I'm just amazed at all of the history that is there for the taking. I think one of my favourite little towns in Australia would be Burra in South Australia. Just a beautiful little place, really amazing. So much history there. Talbotville, another place. I'll include a link to that awesome photo that Graham shared with us on Facebook about Talbotville. So it's a picture of Talbotville looking across one of the streams, not the stream where I killed my Jeep, but the other stream, or the other entrance into Talbotville. There was a bridge back then. I think the photo's from around 1920, and it just shows what a bustling little town Talbotville was back then. And, now some people go there and they don't even realise that there was a town there. So really important to think about the history that we've got. And I think it's really fascinating to learn what it is that has gone on in some of these places and the hard lives that these people lived back then. It's getting colder and colder here. I was hoping to get a snow run in today, but there was a little bit too much sunlight over the last couple of days. Hopefully in the next week or two we'll be able to get out and have a good snow run. And hopefully I'll see you out on the track. That's it. Bye.
4x4earth.com is used by over 200,000 people every month to find great tracks, organise trips, and find out how to better enjoy exploring the great outdoors. There's over 1,000 tracks and 300 campsites ready for you to explore. So check out 4x4earth.com today and sign up to get access to the track information, ask questions, and meet other 4x4 Earthers. Membership is completely free. If you're looking for a good route, check out 4x4earth.com today.